These are the world's three biggest economies, and this is the one that beats them all in terms of wealth. According to the rules of classical economics, Switzerland should be poor. No access to the sea, which is a death sentence for trade. No natural resources, no oil, no gas, no gold mines or diamonds. It has hostile territory, 70% mountains of rock and ice, where farming is a nightmare, and building infrastructure costs billions. Geographically, it was doomed to be poor, and for centuries it was. But today, an adult Swiss citizen owns almost 3 times the wealth of a German, and comfortably surpasses an American too. So the question comes naturally, how did they do it? How did this nation, which just 150 years ago was full of hungry peasants and migrants, become so rich? Some of you will think, it's the banks, it's dictators' dirty money, convenient stereotypes that tell only a fraction of the truth and keep us from questioning ourselves. But today, we won't settle for easy answers. In this episode of the Inside Your Country series, we'll uncover the hidden mechanism that turned Switzerland into one of the most prosperous nations on the planet. A system no one has ever really explained to you. And stay with us until the end, because we'll reveal 3 fundamental practical lessons that Europe and the rest of the world absolutely must learn from Switzerland if they want to avoid economic decline. Welcome to Amazing Europe! To understand today's wealth, we have to look at yesterday's desperation. Until the mid-19th century, Switzerland wasn't the country of bankers. It was the country of emigrants fleeing hunger. The Alpine land was too harsh, and the main export wasn't chocolate, it was blood. More than 2 million Swiss mercenaries died fighting for the kings of France or Spain, simply because back home there was no bread. Why so much poverty? Because the country was a geographic cage. No raw materials, no sea. While its neighbours built empires thanks to coal and ocean routes, Switzerland remained cut off. So how did the miracle happen? The seeds of change had been planted much earlier. Between the 1600s and the 1700s, Switzerland took in thousands of Huguenots, Protestant refugees fleeing France. They were the technological elite of their time, watchmakers, bankers, textile experts. But that know-how stayed frozen for more than a century in a Switzerland that was divided and fragmented. The real fuse was the 1848 constitution. Only then did Switzerland become a modern state, with a single currency and a political stability that finally allowed that software brought by the refugees to spread across the country. Under Calvinist ethics, the Swiss adopted a revolutionary logic: value density. They realised that if transporting 1 kilo of goods across the Alps cost 10 times more than on flatland, that kilo had to be worth 100 times more. Instead of turning iron into pots and reselling them for pennies, they bet on extreme miniaturization. They imported raw iron worth a few cents and, with the precision learned from the Huguenots, turned it into watch gears worth thousands of francs. Switzerland stopped selling materials and started selling intelligence, giving birth to the legendary precision industry. But it was missing energy. Without coal, the Industrial Revolution risked fizzling out. If it didn't have black deposits, it did have a resource that fell from the sky, the brute force of water dropping from the peaks. Pioneers like Jean-Daniel Colladon turned the disadvantage of steep gradients into pure energy by inventing white coal, hydropower. Unlike German coal, which concentrated thousands of workers in polluted cities, hydropower was available anywhere there was a stream. That made it possible to bring factories into remote valleys, creating a decentralized industrialization. The Swiss remained masters of their valleys, avoiding the social tensions that were burning across Europe, and building that network of hyper-specialized small firms that still dominate global markets today. But this distributed factory needed a shield, and that's where the most talked about secret comes in. There's a fixed idea about Switzerland: the image of a giant gold vault protected by banking secrecy. It was a criminal obligation, introduced by the 1934 law, which punished with prison any banker who disclosed client information. But that world is over. Under pressure from the United States and the OECD, since 2017 secrecy for non-residents has been dismantled, replaced by the automatic exchange of information. Of course, this contributed in part to Swiss wealth, but the banking and insurance sector, while fundamental, accounts today for about 10% of GDP. A solid figure, but not enough to explain why this country consistently ranks among the world's most prosperous. And that 10% share isn't an anomaly. Countries like the United Kingdom, Cyprus, or Malta show similar numbers. The real European outlier is Luxembourg, where the banking insurance sector exceeds 25% of GDP. The truth is that Switzerland isn't a bank, it's the most advanced high-precision factory in the West. While over the past 30 years, many European and North American nations have dismantled their productive base, betting on services or consumption, Switzerland did the opposite. It defended its factories tooth and nail. Today, pure manufacturing represents about 18% of Swiss GDP. If you include the entire industrial sector, it reaches 25%. Countries like the United Kingdom or France have seen manufacturing collapse below the critical 10% threshold. But it's not just a matter of percentages, it's a matter of density. There's a technical metric called industrial value added per capita, the thermometer of each citizen's productive power. In Switzerland, it reaches $19,000 per person, an enormous figure that is roughly double Germany, stuck at around $10,000, and it leaves the American giants behind at about $9,000. Every single Swiss citizen produces twice the industrial wealth of a German. But what comes out of these factories? The Swiss mechanism doesn't bet on volume, it bets on criticality. More than half of everything Switzerland exports, a full 52%, belongs to the chemical pharmaceutical sector. Not just pills, but biotech and molecules protected by ironclad patents. Alongside giants like Novartis and Roche, there is a whole galaxy of companies you could call the industry of the invisible. World leaders in niches so narrow that almost no one knows their names. Yet without them, the modern world would grind to a halt. One Swiss firm sits behind the flavour of your favourite snack. Another behind the perfume you wear. Another still produces the only valve capable of handling the pressure inside certain nuclear reactors. In Switzerland, there are about 20 of these global leaders per million inhabitants, a density with no equal. These companies don't compete with non-Swiss firms on price. They never could, given their high costs, but on irreplaceability. And to remain irreplaceable, they invest 3.4% of GDP in research and development, one of the highest shares in the world. The lesson is clear. Switzerland's real vault isn't made of gold bars. It's an industrial base that chose to produce what nobody else can. But how do you govern an economy this powerful without crushing it? The secret isn't in the factories, it's in how power is organised. Producing wealth is only half the job. The other half, where almost the entire world fails, is not wasting it. In Western democracies, the state expands without limit. The more money comes in, the more bureaucracy grows, the higher taxes rise, and the more debt devours the future. Why doesn't that happen in Switzerland? The answer lies in their political software, an efficient control system that prevents politicians from spending other people's money for electoral gain. The first gear is competitive federalism. Picture Switzerland not as a single state, but as a condominium of 26 sovereign mini-states, the cantons. But why does Switzerland have this federalism? The reason is historical. While France or Italy were built from the top down, with rulers unifying territories by force, Switzerland was built from the bottom up. In 1291, 3 alpine valleys swore to help each other against kings, but demanded to remain masters in their own homes. This distrust of central power was carved into the 1848 constitution. The Swiss decided the federal government had to be weak, leaving real power to local citizens. And one of the most productive effects of this federalism is that it creates permanent tax competition. In fact, the 26 cantons aren't mere provinces, they are sovereign states that independently decide how much to tax your income and your wealth. And if Zurich raises taxes or wastes money, a company doesn't have to flee abroad. It can simply move to Zug or Schwyz, 20 minutes away. Politicians know it. If they're inefficient, they lose taxpayers. It's a market for efficiency that forces the state to stay lean. But there is a second, more powerful gear: direct democracy. In Switzerland, citizens don't just vote every 4 years and then hope politicians keep their promises. Here, the citizen is the politician's real employer. Just 50,000 signatures are enough to block and overturn a law passed by Parliament, or 100,000 signatures to propose a new one and amend the constitution. Some will say, direct democracy is only possible because Switzerland is small. You can't replicate it. It's a logical objection, but it rests on a false myth, which we'll debunk at the end of the video. Who decided on this power? The people themselves, through reforms between 1874 and 1891. The result is a system in which lawmakers are afraid of the people. Before drafting a law, they must consult all social stakeholders to avoid being crushed in a referendum. It's a slow process, but infinitely more solid and closer to citizens' real will. And if you think people are selfish and vote only for state handouts, you're wrong. In 2001, the Swiss did something unique. 85% approved the debt brake. They wrote into the constitution a mathematical requirement that the state must never spend more than it takes in. The results are overwhelming. While public debt in the United States and in many European countries has exploded beyond 100% of GDP, Switzerland is one of the few European nations that has steadily reduced it, bringing it down to around 38%. They understood that debt is a deferred tax on children, and they decided to stop stealing their future. This obsession with sovereignty also explains the great rejection of the European Union. In 1992, while the government was pushing to join, the people delivered a thunderous no. They feared that Brussels' foreign judges would trample their direct democracy, and that free movement would drive down their very high wages. Instead of giving in, they chose the bilateral route: trade with everyone, but take orders from no one. In Switzerland, mathematics and popular will sit above politics. But to protect this island of wealth and independence in a continent that is often on fire, laws and referendums aren't enough. You need a physical shield, and that's where the most misunderstood secret of all comes in. There's another word associated with Switzerland: neutrality. But this is where most outside observers make their biggest mistake. In Europe and America, we confuse neutrality with pacifism, or worse, weakness. Nothing could be further from the truth. Switzerland is not a defenseless dove, it's an armed hedgehog. It has one of the highest concentrations of firearms in the world. A federal law requires shelters near home. Since the 1960s, almost every building has a bunker, allowing the population to disappear underground within minutes. For decades, they rigged their strategic tunnels and bridges with explosives, sending a ruthless message to the great powers. If you want to use our valleys to invade your enemies, we'll blow everything up. You'll be left with impassable mountains and rubble. A hedgehog isn't aggressive, but if you try to bite it, it will wreck you. Who decided on neutrality? Historically, it was the European great powers in 1815 at the Congress of Vienna that imposed Switzerland's role as a buffer between France and Austria. But the Swiss did something brilliant. They turned a diplomatic obligation into a business model. They understood that in a continent perpetually at war, whoever stays neutral automatically becomes the guardian of other people's treasures. This neutrality created the most precious asset of all: trust. That's why the Swiss franc is the safe haven currency par excellence. In wartime, investors flee the major currencies and run to the franc, because neutrality guarantees it will never be deliberately devalued to finance a conflict. However, even the most perfect mechanism has a weak spot: arrogance. In March 2023, the world watched, holding its breath, as Credit Suisse collapsed. How could it happen in the land of prudence? The answer is simple: the bank stopped being Swiss. Not in the literal sense, its headquarters were still in Zurich, but because it stopped following the Swiss economic model. For years, its executives tried to imitate Wall Street's speculative playbook, chasing insane risks and global scandals. They betrayed the mechanism of prudence in pursuit of the bonuses of toxic finance. To save it, UBS acquired Credit Suisse, but this operation created a dangerous precedent. Today, UBS is a giant whose balance sheet is twice Switzerland's entire GDP. The question haunting Bern is, what if UBS fails too? To prevent citizens from paying again, Switzerland has bet everything on the so-called bail-in, a law that forces private investors, not taxpayers, to absorb losses. But the truth is, we're in uncharted territory. Right now, at the start of 2026, a brutal standoff is underway between the government, which is demanding another 25 billion in capital buffers, and UBS, which accuses the state of killing its competitiveness. The reality is worrying. If a colossus of this size were to truly collapse, not even Fortress Switzerland would have enough gold to repair the damage. It would be an earthquake that no law, however strict, can honestly claim it can manage with certainty. But this nation's real resilience doesn't lie only in vaults or bunkers. It lies in something much deeper, something tied to how they shape their people. Because while the rest of Europe produces unemployed graduates, Switzerland produces the best-paid professionals on the planet. There's another part of the mechanism that is often overlooked, but it's the one that guarantees the country's social stability. While much of Europe is living through a silent drama, graduates ending up as bartenders or staying unemployed until they're 30. Switzerland solved the problem at the root. Here, youth unemployment is almost non-existent, consistently below 3%. How is that possible? The answer lies in a choice Swiss teenagers make at just 15. Instead of everyone rushing toward academic high school and university, about 70% choose the apprenticeship route. But be careful, this isn't a fallback for people who don't want to study. It's an elite system called dual education. Here's how it works. The student works 3 or 4 days a week in a company, getting paid between 800 and 1,400 francs a month, and studies the theory at school for the remaining 1 or 2 days. Who decides what they have to study? In most of the world, it's a Ministry of Education bureaucrat sitting in the capital. In Switzerland, it's industry associations that define the training plan. They determine which software, machines, and skills are actually needed today, making sure schools aren't teaching notions that are 20 years out of date. The state, of course, doesn't disappear. The Confederation ensures that every apprentice studies language, law, and civics. The goal isn't just to create a perfect technician, but an informed citizen capable of voting in referendums. The state sets the rules and certifies the final exams, but it has the humility to let industry lead technical training. The result? What a student learns on Monday in the classroom is exactly what they will use on Tuesday in the workshop. This synchronization wipes out youth unemployment, guarantees industry the best talent, and allows young people to start earning at 15. Switzerland isn't the only country with apprenticeships. Germany and Austria have similar models too, but the Swiss system wins on flexibility. While the German model is slowed down by bureaucracy and union conflicts, here the labour peace prevails. A historic pact in which companies and unions renounce strikes and resolve every dispute through dialogue. This provides stability and makes the system agile and prestigious. In Switzerland, apprenticeship isn't a fallback, it's a fast track for tomorrow's leaders. A carpenter can become a CEO because there is a dignity of competence. Workers aren't looked down on by graduates, and a precision mechanic is respected as much as a lawyer. Want proof? Sergio Emotti, the current CEO of UBS, did not build his rise on a degree in economics. At 15, while his European peers were shut in a classroom studying theory, he started as an apprentice in a small bank in Lugano. It's true that much later in his career, when he was already an established leader, he attended an executive program at Oxford, but his foundations are practical. He is the product of a system that doesn't ask for a piece of paper. It evaluates what you can actually do. That is real social mobility, starting on the ground without university debt and ending up on the board of one of the most powerful banks in the world. The Swiss state had the humility to take a step back, leaving the private sector to steer education. The result is an industry with the best technicians in the world and a youth that isn't a burden on society, but its economic engine. Now that we've analysed this mechanism, one last question remains. What can we learn? And above all, Is it true that Switzerland only works because it's small and that its model can't be replicated? Before we find out, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to support our project with a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to turn on all notifications. Thank you very much. Some of you will say, all very nice, but Switzerland is small. We can't do this here. It's a convenient answer, but it's an excuse. Switzerland isn't rich because it's small. It's rich because it chose responsibility. To be clear, we're not naive. We know perfectly well you can't copy it in every respect. But if we want to avoid decline, there are a few lessons we must have the courage to learn. We'll name only 3, and we invite you to share your opinion in the comments. Number 1. Those who mess up pay. The real enemy isn't the size of the state, it's excessive centralisation. When the central government covers local debts, nobody feels responsible. Switzerland shows that financial autonomy is a powerful brake on waste. If citizens know no government will bail them out, they will hold their administrators accountable immediately. Of course, it won't always work that way, but it's a fact that the most effective oversight only works at short range. Number 2. Stop complaining. The Swiss had every geographic excuse to remain poor, but instead of blaming crises or the government, they rolled up their sleeves. They understood that money isn't a right that should come from the state. It's the result of hard work and an obsession with excellence. Number 3. Change your mindset. Europe must stop measuring educational success by the number of graduates and start measuring it by employment rates and the quality of life of its people. A degree cannot be the only path to social mobility. Even we at Amazing Europe, although we are graduates ourselves, say it clearly. An academic title must not become a fetish. What we need is a direct link between education, work, and business, valuing practical skills as much as theoretical ones. There are many other things we could discuss, but now we'll pass the ball to you. What would you like your politicians and your country to learn from Switzerland? But when one nation rises, others decline. Unfortunately, that's the case with France, which we examined in this video. We recommend watching it, not to make sad comparisons, but to uncover the real reasons that, on the other side, can push a nation into crisis. That's all for this video. See you next time.